Hey friends, welcome to this week's episode of Not Your Mama's podcast. And I am thrilled to welcome back Greg Singleton, an author and former director of IT turned life coach. Greg's debut work focuses on transforming life from rock bottom to purposeful living, which received incredible views and watch time. I'm excited to have him back to discuss practical strategies for parents to help achieve results for kids. Greg, it is such an honor to have you on. And I cannot wait to dive into our topic today about children and kind of how to help them get focused on achieving goals in life.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for the wonderful introduction. Much appreciated. And the ideas of children and creating them focus and how to get them interested in what's best for them is a topic that's hugely important for a lot of people today. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and I think it's important for parents to also recognize it within their children and help encourage them instead of like maybe, dimming the flame of things that you see spark their interest. So my first
Wholeheartedly.
question to you, Greg, is, how can parents stay updated with their children's interests and why is it so important to help build a connection with that?
Um, for me, I coming from an IT world, I recognize that technology changes so vastly quickly that anything within 2 to 3 years is basically going to be obsolete. And how children operate in today's day and age is a lot of the information that they receive is through technology. Now, I'm not saying become steeped in technology and only do that. That is not what I'm saying. There are caveats to this, but I would recommend wholeheartedly being able to understand the platforms that each child is on, because that is how they're going to receive information, whether it's Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok, whatever that may be. So you to be able to develop a stronger connection with your child is extremely important to deliver the information in which they see fit and are receiving it. So if you open up a Snapchat and you just say, "Hey, Timmy, we're going to cook some dinner tonight. Could you grab, a few things out of the fridge and just put them on the counter? Thanks, pal. Love you. See you in a bit." That's going to help deliver the information to the child in the manner that they like. And it's also going to help a connection with your child because they're going to go, "Ah, Dad's using the same stuff that I'm using. He knows how to communicate with me," rather than just trying to run roughshod over telling them what to do. It's just a helpful way to create a more connection constant ability for you to be able to figure out where your children operate.
Yeah, and it's so important. It's really important to be involved with what your children are watching.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on the regular YouTube, like there's so much demonic stuff on there. It's like the
Yes.
skippity toilet and like Speaker Man, and it's just weird ass shit, excuse my French. But it's like,
Oh God, yeah.
you know what I mean? And it's like, what are
Oh
you
yeah.
watching? And these children, they're like sponges, they absorb information and they're blank slates,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they really don't
Yep.
know what the world's like. They're just receiving information and coming up with their own conclusions. And there really is, then there's also that the big blue guy. What's his name? Um, anyway, but he's appeases to children, but talks about evil stuff, like about harming himself.
Oh yes. Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
who was that guy? What's that guy's name again?
I cannot remember his name. I'm staring at him too in my mind, and I can't
Yeah,
say
I
it.
just for some reason I'm drawing a blank, but
Yeah.
he appeases the children, and when you actually listen to what they're talking about, harming yourself, hurting
Yeah.
others and themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very dangerous, and kids are kind of like growing up with like almost sometimes I think a violent mindset, but I don't want to steer too focused off of like the main topic about helping encourage, but I just think it's important to really be tuned into with what your children are watching.
Couldn't agree more because it changes so quickly that if you do not jump in, you could be left behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so why should parents prioritize their children's, actions and over word appearances, and how does this benefit the child?
Ah, this is this is not something that is specific to even just a parent-child relationship, although it is very important in a parent-child relationship.
Mhm.
But a lot of us don't, we choose vanity over value when we actually need to switch that. You need to
Mhm.
choose value over vanity.
Mhm.
And when you start to value the way that your child operates, meaning their actions, their words, their reactions, and what they're doing over the way that they're going to reflect on what's happening in the outside world, when you start to value what they do and how they do it, you start to create and cultivate an environment that allows the child to be more authentic in the way that they are. Because when you think about it, a child only has one way to operate, and that is being authentic,
Mm-hmm.
because they haven't learned another way to be in life. So when you start to value the way that they're operating and you don't choose the vanity aspect of what's going to be reflected in the outside world, what you end up cultivating is the value of the child's actions, words, and responsibilities, so that when they figure out what that authentic way is to operate, you don't have to worry about what's happening in the outside world, because it is a reflection of them and how you brought them up. And it doesn't matter what happens in the outside world because it's authentically them. So
Yeah.
choosing value over vanity is very important.
Yeah. And then can you explain like why being a parental sounding board is more beneficial than being an actual role model? I mean, I know one for me, like I always go by the things are taught, not caught, children pick up on you and things like that. But can you kind of go into a deeper explanation of this question, please?
Yeah, sure. From the way I see the world, is role models are rubber stamps or exact copies of who you either are or who you want to be. And in the reality, being a role model is actually going to rob anyone, especially a child, of the authenticity of who they are. Because you don't want to create an exact copy of you in your child. You want to create that ability for the child to mold the information that you have and make it pliable for them on what suits them, how they work. So being a parental sounding board is a little bit more beneficial in the way that you operate, because it allows the child to ask questions and
Mm-hmm.
say, this is how I see it. And it allows you as an adult to say, okay, this is how I see it. So the lens in which I have seen the world is only brought up through what you have seen.
Yeah.
Now, that means that it's going to be very different for your child. So it creates a conversation between you and your child, rather than saying, this is what I do it this way, now go along. And
Yeah.
that's a one-way street. So creating the opportunity for a connection and a conversation becomes far more valuable when you're a sounding board, rather than just trying to create a replica of who you are,
Yeah. And I
in my
also,
opinion.
no, and I agree because I feel like it also kind of gives them that sense of like independence and like making their
Mm-hmm.
own decisions, and like that confidence and like, okay, like I can make the right choices for myself. Cause I sometimes feel like, childhood traumas come up from like being stifled of being able to really expand your mind and do it the
Okay.
way that you would want to do it or whatever, you know what I mean? And it's like my way or the highway, and then kind of gets you like stuck in like only having to do it this way because you were taught it's only this way, even though you think about doing it that way. It's a whole
Yeah.
psychological thing. But like, but
Huge.
I do agree with that. And I feel like, kind of like it's almost like a little bit of manipulation too, in a way, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like to kind of make them feel like they're being independent in their
Mm-hmm.
thinking, but and also just trusting them too that they can make the right decisions for themselves.
Yeah. And that's hugely important, because that's going to build the confidence that your child doesn't has the ability to ask questions and not just be a student all the time and just receiving information and then replicating it out. It gives them the freedom to be who they are.
Yeah. And it's important, and kind of goes back into my next question of like how important it is to like ask your child, what does help look like, for you right now? And like boosting their confidence,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like being able to do that gives them, like you said, like be able to voice like what they actually need.
Yeah, it's hugely important, especially just the question that you had just referred to. Like, what does help look like to them right now? And the more that you're able to ask that question to your child, that child is then going to have to figure out what that feeling is that they're in, and then figure out what the problem is that they're in, and try to figure out a solution in order to verbally say it, to say, I am stuck on this, rather than saying, you are stuck on this, here's how to do it. So building the confidence for the child to work through their emotions, through their thoughts, through their problems, gives them the ability to finally ask for help, which is honestly one of the strongest things that anyone can ever do in life. So the
Mhm.
earlier you can help your child figure out how to ask for help, man, that is just going to build a level of confidence in that child to move forward, to know that they're not alone, no matter what it is they do, no matter what problem they've come up against, no matter what emotion they're in. They're not going to be alone, and they have the ability and confidence to ask for help. And hopefully, that's just going to carry on throughout their life because you as a parent are able to cultivate that kind of supportive, healthy environment. And that I think is huge.
And, another thing, I think, especially in today's society, it's like everyone's a winner. Everyone gets a prize, which, yes, that's nice. I understand. But there is something with failure, and learning from your mistakes. We talk about that even as adults, like, we learn through our failures. So, how can parents let their children experience those failures, and why is it so important for their growth?
Yeah, for children to fail, let alone adults, even adults failing is still hugely important
Hmm.
because when you allow your child to fail, obviously you have to be the bumpers in the bowling alley that allow the pin to just keep bouncing back and forth as it goes down the alley. So yes, protect them from catastrophe and catastrophic events where their mental health is deteriorating and their point of view becomes very detrimental. Yes, those guardrails need to be in place for you. But failure, which you can ask any adult, if you were to ask anyone to say, what have been the best teaching moments in your life? I would venture to say a good portion of them are going to be that what you failed at.
Yeah.
And there's no greater equalizer and no greater teacher in life than for you to fail at something that you tried to accomplish. You'll figure out another way to do it. And the more you let that child fail, the more resilient they're going to end up being as it moves on in life. Because as you know, and I know, and every adult listening to this, they're going to face a whole lot of challenges the older
Yeah.
that they get. The
Yeah.
earlier the resilience can get built, oof, the better and stronger that child's going to be able to face whatever's going to be challenges are going to come at them.
Yeah.
So failing is huge.
So it is time for the Power Mom Chronicle section. And this is not your first time around. This is your second go. And I cannot wait to know what your answers are for this time. And my first question to you is, what's a game-changing lesson life has taught you?
Um, Life has taught an immense amount of, well, for me, I've had a lot of ups and downs and ebbs and flows. Probably one of the more important ones that life has taught me is responsibility. And what I mean by that is every decision that you've ever made in life, when you start to take responsibility for those decisions, you start to empower yourself rather than feel as though life has happened against you. When
Hmm.
you start to recognize that every decision we've ever made, you and I, in life right now, has led us up to you and I chatting in this podcast, or anyone who's listening to this podcast has led you to this moment. And
Hmm.
that's the responsibility that you get to take, knowing that you've chosen the things that are happening in your life. And when you find the ability to say, that's extremely empowering to know that moving forward, you have the responsibility to choose what is good for you and what is bad for you. And it
Hmm.
is your choice every single time.
Yeah. And who and what inspires you?
Um, I don't know if I would define it as a definitive who or what. I would kind of put it into a category of anyone who operates with an authentic confidence, with the absence of ego.
Hmm.
And when you can actually walk into a room or enter a conversation knowing authentically confident in who you are and what you bring and the value that you are, rather than walking in with the bravado or ego that says you know everything. So the people that can be able to remove the ego from situations and what they do in life really creates an authentic confidence. And those are the people who inspire me. And those are the people that I always want to be around and learn from. So I would put it more of a category of that for sure.
And offer a piece of wisdom for moms or anyone really striving to find their strength and voice.
Well, for moms, first and foremost, I'd like to say anyone who's listening to this who is a mom, your love and compassion and your empathy and understanding are so extremely important to the way that we are raised. So thank you for all that you do, because without it, we would be an absolute mess. So thank you. But to find your strength in your voice will come from your strength. And your strength needs to come from the things that give you peace, calm, and clarity internally. So when you start to seek the things in your life that bring peace, calm, and clarity, you start to build more of an identity in your life rather than just being a mom. You have multiple different things that you are responsible for in life. So when you start to build that internal peace, that internal peace will start to radiate to the outside world. And that's when you have the opportunity for that internal peace to then become the peace that externally permeates those around you. So work on the things that give you peace, calm, and clarity, and you'll find your voice, which will help you bring an immense amount of clarity to those around you.
And the best advice you've ever received?
It would be a whole lot. But if I had to choose one from a lot of the different mentors that have helped me get to where I am and the way that I operate today, would probably be accept the outcome as it is and not as you wanted it to be. And when you're able to finally recognize really what that means, is you don't argue with the truth. And that truth that happens is the outcome that's in front of you. That's not something that you can debate yes or no on. And as it becomes the truth to you, you're easily able to pivot off of what's actually happening. And that creates far less stress, anxiety, fear, projection, and worry, because you have the answer in front of you. And that answer is exactly what you needed. Yeah. So once you realize it, pivot as necessary, and man, life will become so much easier because you're not worrying about things that could have, would have, or should have happened. They just are.
Well, what a great way to end this week's episode of Not Your Mama's podcast, Greg. It was such an honor to have you back on and, talking to our audience with all of your knowledge. All of his links are down below in the show notes. Don't be shy. Go say hi. And I hope to see you all in the next one. Thanks for listening.